As you might imagine, running a YouTube channel that focuses purely on football boots, I spend a lot of my life looking at football boots, reading other reviews, watching other people's content, keeping an eye on what's coming out, trying to discuss with brands and other retailers what's coming and what's big and what things are going to be like. But it's very, very rare that after doing all that, when the boot arrives at my house and I take it out of the box for the first time, that my reaction is holy shit. What's up guys, James here from Boot Wizard Boot Reviews, and today we are looking at the X Ghosted Plus model. So I reviewed the X Ghosted 0.1 in my previous review. That is the laced variation. This is the very top end, most expensive laceless model from Adidas, and it's not just a case of laceless and laces. This is something else, good, bad, or otherwise. There's a lot to talk about here and a lot to unpack, and it's impressive, even if it's not gonna quite be a boot for absolutely everybody. And I'll sit here right at the start of the video and say this could definitely be the best laceless boot that's ever been made, certainly in some areas. So stick around and watch the video so you can find out exactly what I think, find out if these are for you. Get subscribed to the channel to pick up all of my future content and all of this lovely content that's already on the channel, and of course hit that like button if you want to see more from me. But let's just jump straight into it and get into the upper and how it's constructed for this X Ghosted Plus. Now, the upper itself here is not the same upper as on the 0.1. It's actually very different despite sharing a synthetic similarity, and this is Mirage skin, whereas the 0.1 is fluoro skin. The Mirage skin is fewer layers that have been put together, so it's kind of thicker layers but fewer layers, and the upper is thinner. So the best way for me to explain this is to kind of show you the tongue area first. So in this tongue area you can see that there's a mesh grid pattern which is pretty soft, but there's not a lot of give in there, and it's just there so you can slide your foot in. But that mesh grid pattern is a really good representation of what the upper actually looks like if you get really, really close to it. It's a very thin mesh grid that has all been pushed together. It's a synthetic, and it's just a compressed, multiple layers have been put together that give you a crazy thin upper while also maintaining a reasonable amount of stability to the boot. And then there's some reinforcement elements that run along through the boot on both the toe box and the lateral side, less so on the medial side, which is left more untouched. And then you also get some more support elements in terms of a silicone coating that's on the inside of the boot, but not everywhere. It runs kind of about this far up. You also get a strip of it here that covers over the Mirage skin and some little touches of it here. So it really is a very complicated but simple construction. It is a synthetic that's a lot of fibers that have been pressed together to give you a really strong material that's basically in the end one layer, and then you've got a couple of support elements that go with it and a much looser mesh style tongue. And what that leaves you with is an incredibly plasticky feeling boot. Listen to this. But I don't mean that in a bad way. This is a pure, raw, barefoot feeling, even more so than you got from the Ghosted 0.1, which I described as raw and barefoot on many occasions. This is without question thinner, and it's also a little bit softer and a little bit more premium feeling than you're going to get from the 0.1. Admittedly, I do prefer the feeling in the 0.1. The Plus just feels that little bit more I'm going to put them down. The Plus just feels that little bit more slick, and it doesn't feel like it fits my foot quite as well, because of course it doesn't, because I can't really adjust the lacing system. However, with that said, I think this is unquestionably the laceless boot with the best lockdown on the market, and that makes it the laceless boot with the best lockdown ever, in my opinion. The material is pretty stiff, which is great for something that's so thin because it leads itself to being more responsive. And this is 100% an upgrade over what you could have got from the X19 Plus in every area. But that does mean, similarly again to the 0.1, that when you get this boot bent, when you start to bend it and move it, you get creases, you get bumps in the boot. And again, it's not the most comfortable boot you're ever going to buy. But when you're looking to buy something that's got this much of a raw, barefoot feeling from the upper, and then similarly from the outsole, a crazy, raw, aggressive springback, comfort isn't really something that I'm massively concerned about as long as they're not an uncomfortable boot, which these are definitely not. Again, the same as the 0.1, they've chopped off the top of that claw collar design in the tongue area, exactly the same here, and I think that's absolutely a good thing. It means that it doesn't actually bunch up as much, it doesn't become as much of a nuisance on your foot, and this new tongue design, although being completely different from the 0.1, also means that it doesn't actually bunch up enough. It's nice and flexible, it's nice and soft, and it means that getting these on isn't as hard as I expected it to be. The other end of what would have been the claw collar, this back portion here, is far superior in at least looks terms to what you get from the 0.1, which definitely ends up looking and feeling a little bit on the cheap side. But instead of having the same heel pods in both, the Plus model has a much slimmer fit. So these heel pods in the back, they're much more grippy than what you get in the 0.1. They have a aggressive, almost sandpaper-like texture. So when they're abrasive, when you move your hand upwards and down on here, you can feel it kind of, it's almost like little spines of material that pop out of these two little heel pods and they grab onto your socks. It's actually a really clever design and does a good job of giving you good heel lockdown. And I actually have a more comfortable experience in the heel in these boots than I do in the 0.1. So that is definitely positive, and of course you still get the external heel counter back here as well. And it's a pretty good design. I do enjoy the faster than light design that's in the back here. Again, just little touches that make this feel a bit more premium than the 0.1 model. So it's faster than, and then the speed of light in meters per second in numbers there. Something that's a really clever little nod, I think, because everybody's really excited. Everyone's like, oh, F50, adizeros. And this is obviously the X99, which was based on that original 99 gram Adidas boot. And what they've done is they've taken that same idea, because they printed the speed of light on these boots, they printed it on the original 99 gram boots, and now what they've done is they've basically gone and said, hey, you want the F50? Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you a brand new version in this X Ghosted, and it's faster than the speed of light. I think that's it's a subtle little nod. It's a nice little design detail, and I think it's a little tip of the hat from Adi to all of us that have been crying out for the F50 to come back, because they've delivered so much of what we wanted, but it's so much better than I could have anticipated in both models, to be honest. And I think that's a really cool little nod. It's either the designers giving a friendly nod to us or basically saying, shut up, we know what we're doing. One or the other. I did mention that slick upper earlier, and when you're out in the wet in these, you're certainly going to notice that there's no additional grip or texture on here, and it could be an issue for some people. Not a deal breaker, but you definitely need to know that if you're looking for something with a bit of extra texture. You can feel the texture in the more uncoated areas. where you get that crisscross mesh patterning in the synthetic, which runs around the boot, and there's certainly texture there, but it's not really in any area where you make contact with the ball. And there's actually a bit of grippy texture on the outstep of the boot in these 3 stripes. So they actually transition over 2 different areas of material. So this here is one type of fairly grippy material, and then as you go around here, it gets really smooth, and as you come back up here, it gets really smooth. Now, I don't really understand that, because I'd have liked to have seen that grippy element on the instep here, like where I'm going to strike the ball, control the ball more. But maybe it's just purely a dribbling and a touch thing. And I don't really notice a huge difference between the instep and the outstep. The whole thing does feel a little bit slick, and the touch on the whole is very barefoot and very uniform. So you may have already noticed while watching the video that I have these in the SG version. Now don't fret, I know that most people want to know about the FG, and I have the FG in the 0.1, and the 0.1 and the Plus have identical sole plates. So I can actually tell you about the FG and the SG at the same time. Genius, I tell you. So the SG simply takes the FG design, adds in those 6 metal studs as you would anticipate, so it's nothing out of the ordinary for an SG boot. So to run you through what you will get in an FG boot, you get the, I haven't had a chance to clean these, I've been wearing them quite a lot. So you get the bladed studs that run through the heel here, you get the 2 bladed support studs here, 3 across the middle and 2 in the top, and all of these are kind of leaning towards a chevron stud, and they're all angled in such a way to put you very much on your toes, which is the whole purpose of this outsole, which is designed very much like a running spike. So the stud pattern is the same as we've had previously, but the stud shape is much more aggressive, and the boot is far better off for that. You get nice rigidity through the heel and the midfoot in both boots, so that's not really going anywhere, and it lends itself to a very responsive feeling from the sole plate, which I really like. But as with the 0.1, the big ticket item, the selling point, the reason that I was super excited about the Ghosted before it released, this carbon fiber insert. So this is a Carbotex insert, which is the brand that makes them, and it runs from about here all the way up the boot. And what it does is it gives you excellent rigidity through this area while also bending and giving you the most ridiculous energy return and spring back. Like, this is fantastic. Now, if you don't want a stiff outsole, you want like lots of multi-directional movement, you want something that's a bit more flexible, something that I'd always describe as like maybe an old Tiempo sole plate would give you, this isn't going to be for you. But if this is a speed boot, it's designed for pure straight line speed and traction, and this is magic. I absolutely love it. The only difference between the Plus model and the 0.1 model is that you get this fancy wearable finish on the carbon fiber, on the Carbotex insert on the Plus model, which you don't get on the 0.1. But other than that, FG, SG, they're exactly the same boot. So if you buy this in FG, you get this sole plate with a shiny carbon fiber bit. Okay, talking value, and this is always where Adidas Laceless Plus level model boots tend to fall down, in my opinion, because this is going to cost you 280 euros. It's an awful lot of money for a football boot, even in today's market where boots tend to be quite expensive. You're right up there at Superfly level, which is a boot I also don't think is great value for money when you can pick up the Vapor because it doesn't have a collar and it's the same boot. But we have to then bring in this, the Ghosted 0.1, 220 euros, which is significantly cheaper, offers you much of the same feeling, exactly the same outsole, which I think is basically the best thing about the boot in both cases. And the only reason for me to buy this is if you want to go laceless. Yes, the touch on the ball is that little bit thinner, that bit more barefoot, that bit more raw and aggressive, but you get pretty much that entire feeling from the 0.1 model and it costs you so much less money, and you get better lockdown and better responsiveness from the laced version because it has a customizable fit because you simply have laces. Yes, this is more premium. They give you more premium elements. It looks cooler, let's be honest. I do love the little touch on the carbon, but it's all pretty unnecessary. And if you want to buy the best performing boot possible and you want to get a synthetic boot or a ghosted model specifically, then I'm afraid you've got to go 0.1, not plus, and you're going to save yourself a lot of money doing it. Onto the weight, and this is where buying the SG boot has completely shot me in the foot, hasn't it? I was intrigued, I wanted to see what the differences were, check the boots out. I've also got the AG 0.1 coming, another reason to subscribe with the notifications on. So I wanted all the different options. I have the SG, and of course the SG is going to weigh more than the 0.1, so my weight comparison is not going to be fair, shall we say. But we will pop the FG onto the scales, and that's going to come in at about 189, 190 grams in a UK 7.5. If we then take these, the plus level model in the SG stud pattern, and we pop those on the scales, they're coming in at 222 grams. Now, I do want you to consider that that is an SG boot weighing 222 grams in a UK size 8. That is lighter than some boots in FG that you can go out and buy on the market right now. That's about the same weight as an FG Adidas Predator 20.1. That is impressive. Like, the FG, I imagine, is definitely lighter than the 0.1, and this is going to be a very light football boot. So if you're looking for something that's super light, this is definitely going to be a boot to consider, and it's going to be lighter than the 0.1. However, I would hazard a guess that it's not going to be as light as the 160 grams you're going to get from the Puma Ultra, and it will be lighter than the 195 grams you're going to pick up in the Vapor 13 Elite. So, very light. I'm sorry I don't have the numbers. I got carried away and ordered SG. And finally, onto the fit and comfort here. And this is where Adidas have been advertising this vacuum fit, which they've also advertised for the 0.1 model, but I didn't even mention it in my review because basically I didn't feel it. It's a very close, tight to the foot wrap in the 0.1, but I didn't get that vacuum feeling, you know, that sensation they're talking about where you put your foot in and you can hear all the air escape. That's absolutely not the case with the 0.1, as I will now, with the plus, as I will now demonstrate. So this vacuum fit idea is actually very clever because, of course, we have the consistent problem with a plus level boot from Adidas that it is not adjustable, it's one shape, and it only fits one particular foot type. If your foot type doesn't match the boot, doesn't fit you well, it affects your lockdown and your responsiveness and the overall performance of the boot. But the way that the material is built here to try and form around your foot as closely as possible with that vacuum fit, kind of sucking the air out and pushing the boot closer to your foot, starts to kind of alleviate some of those problems. Now, it's not going to revolutionize laceless boots, in my opinion. There's still a bit of excess room in here for me, and I do think that having laces is still the way to go. But that vacuum fit gives me a much closer to the ball, much tighter fit than I've ever had before in a pair of laceless boots, which is particularly surprising from a synthetic. Particularly a synthetic, which is obviously that little bit stiffer. You would expect that this can't really form to your foot because it has a very predetermined shape, unlike some knit boots like the Lotto Solista. That is a very soft knit that wraps around your foot, it kind of molds a little bit. You wouldn't expect that from this, but it actually does a reasonable job, and it's an improvement over the 19 Plus for sure, even though, as always, I will recommend the 0.1 over the Plus if you want to get the best possible performance. In pure sizing terms, I already spoke about this right at the beginning. You want to go down half a size is my advice. I gave the same advice for the 0.1. So if you want to get the best possible fit out of this with the close to the ball feeling and get the boot to wrap your foot as closely as possible, you should go down half a size from your regular size. In terms of width, these definitely run a bit wider than the 0.1 model, so it's going to be a little bit more forgiving, but it is still that predetermined shape no matter how good the vacuum fit is. So if you do have a very wide foot, I'm still not going to recommend these super highly, but they're going to be okay for a vast majority of people. The comfort is fine, as I alluded to earlier. It's not the most comfortable boot you're ever going to wear, but it's not uncomfortable either. It's just the nature of having this super thin, super barefoot synthetic in a laceless boot. It's not really going to be able to be super comfortable. The insole was a fairly standard Adidas lightweight insole with a really nice synthetic suede top layer. Does a good job of kind of holding onto your socks if you've got grip socks on. Is what it is. It's not that exciting. Do check out my 0.1 review as well. That's already up on the channel. It gives you even more details. And if you have any questions about either of the boots, then do put them down in the comments. I will answer every single person. If you did like the video, you love these brand new boot releases and me getting them to you as quickly as possible, then please hit the like button. Helps the channel out a huge amount. And as I say, I do have the AG version of the Ghosted 0.1 on the channel very soon as well. So get subscribed with notifications on to pick that up, along with my Mercurial versus Ultra versus Ghosted speed boot battle. That's all from Boot Wizard here today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon.